I don't think business owners should worry about everybody's opinions, when it comes to your own staff. Take it as input, but, if you think it's the right thing to do, then you're going to want to do that. And if people disagree with it, they'll leave of their own accord.
Hi, everyone. This is Joshua Hoffman and Alex Garashenko, and welcome to another episode of the Masters in Marketing Agency podcast, where we deconstruct the why and how agency owners found their success, and in Season 3 discuss how to build a community and referral network. Today, I have Cash Miller, the founder and CEO of Titan Digital, a marketing agency that provides web design, graphic design, search marketing, and social media services to all businesses, I should say, businesses of all sizes. Welcome, Cash.
Hey, it's great to be here.
And so I want to jump right into it and go back to the early days, because I think, honestly, you might have the most interesting start to an agency. And I know you've told this on other podcasts, but honestly, the story is so good that I ask you to say it again. So can you tell us where you started or when you started the agency and how it all got started?
So I'm a multiple time business owner. And like I tell people, I've only done really two things. I've been a business owner and I've been in the military. That's like it. So I did the military and in the Army in the 90s. And I ran a business for 8 years. Then I went back in the military and spent another like 4.5 years. I did about 7.5 total. And then I eventually became an agency owner. So when I went back in the military, it was 2007, and I went back in, thought I would make it a career, but I had been an entrepreneur for like 8 years. As a previous business taken over from my father, I'd been really burned out. So, that's why I got out of it. But so I thought, military, I'll do the career thing and everything. And then it took me not even a year. I was getting ready to deploy to Iraq. And I was like, I need to do something. My creative energy was starting to come back on the front. And I ended up thinking, well, why don't I do like a small business website? And I'll put in all of the mistakes I made, I'll write a bunch of content and, I'll see what happens. And so I ended up during my deployment as just, you'd have some time, when you have free time, you got to have something to do, right? So I ended up building my first website, and I wrote a bunch of content, like 100 articles on, everything from accounting to marketing to management, but eventually I got to the point where I was like, I don't want to keep writing all this content, and I also need traffic, so how do I get traffic? I'm self-taught in SEO. Back in 2007, everybody's self-taught. If you started around there, you learned from other people posting stuff online, but there wasn't universities and things like that now, like they have now that are teaching these programs. You all learn, everybody learned from somebody else that was already doing. So, on the content side, I decided to hook up with some business coaches and say, hey, can I use your content? I'll give you a link to your website and everything. And then I started learning the SEO side and growing the traffic. And the coaches started noticing the traffic growth because they were starting to get more referral traffic from it. So some of them started asking me how I was doing it. And I was like, well, I'm SEO, the site's SEO and everything. And some of them were willing to hire me. So it was like before, side hustles became like a term. I was doing a side hustle because my day job was in the military. I would do that. And then if I had time at the end of the day, I might write another piece of content or tweak some of the content I had, publish somebody's stuff. And I just kept growing that traffic. And then you get to like 2011 and I'm like, I don't want to stay in the military. I wonder if I can make this SEO thing, a full-time gig. And it's funny, my very first, I had a few business coaches that were paying me on the side, but what I consider like one of my first true clients was actually a mergers and acquisitions company of all things. And I was hired as like a freelancer to do paid ads for them, Google ads. And I was running those Google ads from Afghanistan. I'd been deployed there and they didn't know I was there. It was it was a side hustle.
Wait, but I want to dive in a little bit more into the setting. Like, what does your day-to-day look like with trying to start this while still being in the Army?
Well, so since I started in Iraq, my day-to-day, I was in the quartermaster supply side, and we would do convoys and go from base to base. I was in Baghdad, and we would go out. So my day-to-day would be in the morning. I'd be prepping to go on a mission, some supply mission to some cop supply. I was in a combined arms unit. So we had Abrams tanks and Bradleys and such. We had infantry guys, tankers and things, and they would have forward posts. So we'd have to go to those posts. So we would get our convoys ready. I drove truck, like the big, giant trucks that you see that the Army has. That was my day job, so I would drive those things. And we'd be out all day, and then I would come back, like we'd get done with the mission. We'd come back, and if, we were off once we were like settled away, okay, and we lived in our base was a place called Fob Rustamaya, and it was a old Iraqi military training base. So we had what passed for their version of barracks and stuff. So, I had a couple of roommates, and I would go back and I'd yank out my computer, and we paid for internet, so we could get online. They'd have local Iraqis selling us. We'd have to plug in this card into our computer to get into the network that was broadcast over the base and everything. I don't remember. It wasn't cheap, I remember, for considering where we were. And so I would do that, and I would keep working on this site. It might be 9 o'clock at night, but I would be, okay, let's publish more content. Let's optimize it. Let's let Google know all about it. And I just kept learning. If I wasn't doing something on the site, I was reading constantly, to figure out more ththings about it. It's like I say, self-taught, there's all sorts of things. And I tried a number of different things too when I was learning it. I tried, dip my toes in, affiliate marketing, and, can we make, because my original idea was, if I grow the traffic enough, can I make money on AdSense? I say Google's program, where can I make money doing this?
Crazy. First of all, thank you for your service. And I guess thank you for also building a company and being on the podcast. What, tying the military and the business, what did you learn from the military that you brought to the business?
The biggest takeaway I always get, from the military is when you're in any kind of organization like that, especially with the way that promotions work. When I got out, I was a sergeant. And so I had soldiers that worked for me. And I, of course, worked, I had my leadership. And you learn ways to manage and ways not. You see you see good leaders. And I had some really good ones, and I also had some bad ones, and I would see how they would treat other people. So one of the things is people management, the way you treat them, how you get them to do things. In the military, it's always a big thing that do wrong, make them do a push-up. Like I said, we'll beat it in, not beat it, but, we will drill it into your head, of how you messed up, not to do it again and stuff. And I'm like, well, okay, that's not going to actually work in the business world. And I had run a business. I knew it didn't work. So I took some of my previous business experience and applied it to my leadership position. And then I also learned, how do you kind of look at the bigger picture of things, of the people you're working with, and how, because you deal with so many different people in the military, different backgrounds, ethnicities, like all sorts. And when I was deployed, I spent a lot of time dealing with Iraqis. I spent a lot of time in Afghanistan. I had to deal with, Afghanis too. And you learn how to deal with people, how to treat them right, how to earn their respect, how to manage them, manage time. All of these things are lessons that are pivotal, in the business world. And so I take those things, and I use them on a daily basis, because I saw what bad leaders look like when they would just yell at you and scream and, and belittle you and things like that. You see that because the nature of the military and how promotions work, you're going to get people that should not be leaders. It's just the way that's going to happen. But you also get some really good people too. And those people, you take those lessons and they understood those things. I had 2 platoon leaders, platoon sergeants different people when I went to Iraq and Afghanistan, and you saw different leadership styles. And those people, if anything ever went wrong, those were people I respected, and I knew that they would make the right calls. They would make the right decisions, because I could see them on a day-to-day basis, the way they carried themselves, the way they acted, the way they treated other people, how their decision-making went. And it was invaluable.
No, that's I think that's a bunch of great lessons. And now to go from leaders to community, right? So now not just the people at the top trying to get everything together, but obviously community, from my understanding, is and this being, the topic of season 3 is a big part of being in the Army. So for lack of a better question, what was it like to build the community, to be part of the community when you were there?
Well, the military, so it's really an interesting thing because you get a lot of people coming and going. You don't dictate, people end up on orders, they join your unit, they leave your unit for various reasons. And when you're constantly getting new people and having people leave, you're always evaluating skills, you're seeing how people fit. You get a lot of different personalities. And we had this interesting thing when you talk about building community. So when I went to Iraq, I was stationed in Fort Hood, Texas, and it's like one of the biggest military posts in the world. I was part of the 4th Infantry Division, and my battalion deploys. We had a lot of people that were under the program known as stop loss. So it's 2007, 2008 when we deployed. So stop loss was a program that kept people from leaving the military because of the units or the jobs that they had. So their contract was up, but say the unit was soon to deploy, they would not allow them to end the contract. They involuntarily extended you to the end of the deployment. So you end up with a lot of people that have a lot of experience, but they're disgruntled. So you have a disgruntled community. And we had a number of people that when we went to Iraq that they didn't want to be there. They shouldn't have been there, but the Army said, you're going to be here, because we need you to fill these slots. Otherwise the unit would be shorthanded and we still need to send them. So you end up with a certain type of very veteran community. A lot of these, most of them had already been to Iraq before. They'd already been somewhere. So they're very experienced, but there's that element of resentment towards the military. Because they, as far as they're concerned, they should be on with their life and not in the military anymore. So you end up with this. And then when we get back, all of these people are released. So you have one type of community of all these experienced people. Then they're allowed to go home. And our unit, though, we also contained a lot of people that were due to go to new assignments. So they were staying in the military, but they were meant to be reassigned to a different base. And they took our unit and they moved it from Fort Hood to Fort Carson, Colorado. All right. Fort Carson's a great post, really beautiful spot. It's up in the mountains. It's in Colorado Springs. Well, the brigade, a typical Army brigade, is about 4,500 people, depending on what type of brigade it is. So that's about what we had. Well, after Iraq, we lost 3,000 of them. Okay. And then the remaining 1,500-ish of us, we became the core of rebuilding the brigade. And now you go from this community of people that are all experienced at what they do to we get the greenest people that the Army has to offer. So we go from totally one of the most experienced probably in the Army to the least experienced in the military. And we had to prep for Afghanistan. So now you have this core group of people that have been there, done that. And they have to now take these other brand new people fresh out of basic training. They were either people that had been out of basic training recently, and this was their first duty assignment, or you had people that had never deployed before and the Army wanted to have them do their part. So they might have been more senior people, but they had never gone to the war zone. So they would assign them. Well, either way, so you have this like interesting dynamic of inexperience, and then you have other people that are experienced as far as the military is concerned, but not as far as what you're about to go do. So it's a different type of community.
No, I love that. And now to go from disgruntled people in the Army to disgruntled people in the workplace. You wrote an article in Forbes, I think it's 2019 is what my notes say. And it's, remember that it's your company. Everyone else is just along for the ride. And in there, you discussed how you've actually changed your initial vision. Not everyone was on board, and you made a few changes in that way. So can you actually just talk about what the process was like for that?
So when you're just like with community and stuff, when you start a business as an owner, you have a certain vision, but over time that vision can change. And you can have other employees, people that work for your company that they may have you were one thing when they began, when they joined you. Okay. And over time, things might change some, and they don't necessarily like that. People in general are very stubborn about change. That's just that is human nature. Okay. people like a lot of people, say, for example, if you work a factory job, okay, you're somebody on the line, you're doing a certain job. That job doesn't necessarily change much until you get promoted or something and you move to a different position. People don't like change. That's why they do those kinds of jobs. And that goes for any number of businesses. Even in a marketing agency, if you are a graphic designer, you design websites. That's it. That's your job. Or you do print, or you code, or whatever it may be. So if you change how you do things, who you work with, that is disruptive. And anytime you disrupt something, so in the digital marketing world, we changed, we put at certain times, we put more focus to certain industries because there's a different way to sell. If you can tell people that you're an expert in that industry, and you do become an expert, if you focus in, and you don't have to focus on just one, you can do multiple, but, we deal with a lot of different industries, but I tell people we have concentrations of certain types of clients, based on the industry. We do a lot of insurance, but I also do a lot of hardware stores. But I've dealt with all sorts. We've got 600 some clients. So you can end up with people resistant to the change. At the end of the day, in that article was about the fact that you are the one person that has to go through it. If you make the wrong decision, you'll suffer for it. If you make the right, you'll benefit. But a lot of those people that are resistant when you are going through that process may not be around. Majority, look at the workforce. How many of them? Nobody stays for a 20-year career with anybody anymore. That may have been, back in 1950. Sure, that was constant. That was the typical thing. Stay at a company like General Electric or Ford or something, and you'd be there your whole career. Who does that anymore? Yeah, and especially in this type of industry, it doesn't happen. If you get 5 years out of somebody, that's a long time. The average is probably more like 3. In which case, what I want to do as a business owner, 3-4 years down the road, you're not even going to be around to see, what came of it. I will be, though. So I'm not, I don't think business owners should worry about everybody's opinions, when it comes to your own staff. Take it as input, but, if you think it's the right thing to do, then you're going to want to do that. And if people disagree with it, they'll leave of their own accord.
Alex, did you have something?
I had something about the the communities in the Army. Obviously, there was a difference between the community of the veterans, or people who may have been disgruntled, and I'm sure a lot of them were not. And then the new community that came in, where they were more green. Was one of the communities tighter than the other?
Yes. So the veterans would end up being a lot tighter. The people that have been there, because they have shared experiences. The disgruntlement was because the Army was keeping them past their contract lengths, and they were being forced to deploy. So they're risking their lives again. Because the nature of the jobs and going out, if you deploy to a war zone, everybody's at risk. I don't care what you do. So the disgruntlement came from that. And that wasn't at the people around them. That was just at the Army in general. But you have a tighter knit group because they may have deployed already before. I know when we came back, we were way tighter. So what we ended up, when we changed bases, we had all these new people come in. So it was almost like there's us, because we still had this core group of people that we had been there. We had gone to Iraq. And then you had all these new people. Now, when we got back, after a few months in Afghanistan, that group starts to develop a tight-knit focus too. It's a shared experience. That's the thing. And anything for a war zone is so much more of a shared experience, because once you deploy, you don't see a lot of personnel turnover. They wait till you get back. So I had soldiers under me that, I trained them to do, their jobs better. Over time, we would go on missions constantly. I was an NCO, a non-commissioned officer. So my job at that point, in Iraq, I would drive the truck. In Afghanistan, and we did resupply mission. So we would run fuel, food, bullets, you name it. And we were doing this constantly. And in Afghanistan, as in Kandahar, you would be paired up with different people all the time. So you would get to know them on a way more intimate, basis of just who they are, those people. And that happens across the whole unit. And a platoon, when you boil it down, our platoon was about 45 people. So that's 45 people working together constantly every single day. You don't get a break when you're deployed. You don't go home at the end of the day. So you build those shared experiences, and eventually they turn, like what I had in Iraq. That's what Afghanistan. All of those people came together the same kind of way. It just, you don't start out that way. Yeah, you become that over time. And when we went to Iraq, a lot of those people had already been in the unit. They'd been on the previous deployment. So they'd already gone through these experiences. So you get that tight knit part. And when I joined them, I was another cog, and eventually you get brought into the fold, sort of. As they learn what you're capable of doing. Initially you're an outsider. But eventually you're accepted as long as you're, good at your job and you're competent and they like you and all those, just the standard stuff.
If you were starting a community now of peers, not business owner to employees, but peers, other business owners, and how would you, let's say it's other digital marketing agencies, what type of shared experiences do you think would be helpful to create bonds that create a strong community?
Whenever I talk to so there's a couple of things that go into that. Everybody has to deal with clients on some level. So one of the biggest shared experiences is the types of clients we deal with. Yeah. I've talked to other agency owners, have my own little network and stuff. And one of the constant things that you hear are, unfortunately, the bad experiences. You could take that and say, okay, how would we turn those things into more positive experiences, or the lessons that can be learned? So because every agency owner is going to have some client that was, for whatever reason, extremely difficult. And you have to learn from those to avoid, the future. I was just having that kind of an experience yesterday where we were talking to a prospective client, and my team, there was 3 of us talking to this client. My team was kind of pushing a little bit, like, yes, let's put together a plan. And I'm in the background going, no, not this guy. This is not a good fit for us. And I was getting flashbacks of some previous clients that were just really difficult. And I said, look, this guy's a referral. We need to talk to the source that referred. And sure enough, that guy says, yeah, this guy's really high maintenance. I'm like, no, we'll take a pass, on this. And so that's one of the things that you help other business owners. It's like, what are some of the red flags? So that kind of a shared experience. We've all dealt with it. Everybody. Everybody's had that bad client experience. And then you also have things, because as business owners, you have a lot in common. It can be employees that don't get the vision or are difficult to manage. So how do you deal with those things? So unfortunately, some of it's like on the negative side, but the idea is to be able to figure out strategies that can make it more of a positive, because everybody, depending on the size of the agency, is going to run into different problems. I've experienced a lot of the things that a smaller agency, is maybe just going through, whereas you could have an agency that's, larger than mine, and they've got a different set of experiences. Like at some point they went through what I was going through, or what I am, and then, and what I may come up against next. And that goes with signing clients. Like there's all sorts of things, because every agency's running into the same challenges.
Great. Thank you.
And you mentioned referrals, which, again, staying on the topic of community, I think is a great way of, I shouldn't say milking your community. That's a bad way of saying it. Of properly using your community for business on all sides, I guess is what I'll say. Do you have any best practices? Do you have anything that kind of brings in more referrals? Any kind of action on that side?
So the top of mind is that you have to communicate a lot with your clients. Okay. You have clients of different size. Some are going to be larger, some are going to be smaller, but you have to give them all some level of attention because if you don't, automatically somebody will take, is likely to take your place, because they'll go to some networking meeting and there will be somebody there, right, that's saying, hey, I could do it better. And they haven't heard from you in 6 months, because you just, you do a limited number of things for them potentially. Communication is huge. If you're communicating with your clients a lot, even if it's just dropping notes and stuff, quick emails, checking in, saying, hey, you want to go, do a meeting, just, 30 minutes, go through your account, things like that. Because a lot of times business owners are busy. If it looks like it's working in the background, they'll kind of like, nah, I'm good. You should try to pursue these meetings anyway. Yes, everybody's busy. This is why account managers exist. Doesn't have to be you, like somebody on your staff that's appropriate for those kinds of meetings, but you need to be doing that, because if you're not communicating with your clients, somebody will slide in. You can miss opportunities, because if you're talking referrals, for one, if you're heavy on communication, that looks good from customer service. If you're doing your customer service good, then they're more likely to refer somebody over, because you're top of mind to them, and you're top of mind regularly. So when they run into somebody that could use your service, they're more likely to refer. And then also when they are considering doing something additional, if you're communicating well, you're also communicating the other things you can do. Because a lot of businesses, especially if you do like website design, as an example, they'll come to you for a website and they won't realize, because you didn't communicate well, that you also offer half a dozen other things. Hey, we do SEO, or we do social media marketing, or whatever, the case may be. We do these things. A lot of people, if you actually ask your own clientele, they won't realize you do it.
So it's an upsell opportunity as well as a referral.
It is. But
you're right.
Yeah, you have to communicate. If you are not, and the bigger you get, the harder that gets. So you have to stay on top. So the earlier you have in those processes, the more you'll benefit from it.
Why the bigger you get, does it make it harder?
Because you end up with more conversations, and the constant in the agency world is, I have too much work, not enough people. If you talk to the employees, that's what they're always going to say. They're like, you signed this next project, we don't have enough time for it, or something. And so so communication is always one of those things, except for the biggest clients, it always gets put on the back burner, because it still takes time to write an email. And even if you have account managers, but they're busy onboarding new accounts, people forget the easiest, you wouldn't have to onboard as many new accounts if you took care of the ones you had, because you would have less churn. So we've worked really hard in our agency to reduce the churn. Nobody's going to be at zero. You're going to lose some clients here and there, but we've really, we've implemented sending out surveys and asking how we're doing, so we can red flag people if we see that we have an issue on stuff that comes back, and we can communicate directly and try to clean up those issues. Sending out, because a lot of people automate the reports and stuff. Well, we do too, but you still got to communicate. They'll get the report. It's a touch point, but it's not a personal touch point.
How many,
so it's important you do these things.
How many clients approximately can one account manager stay up with and do a good job?
That's going to depend on the nature of the client. If they're smaller clients, you can take a higher number, because it's mostly communication, but there's less actual work. But if the accounts, those clients are doing more, they're going to be more high maintenance, and you're going to have to spend more time with them, which means less. So there's no magic number to it. It's a matter of the nature, the type of client they're actually dealing with. If you've got clients that are spending, thousands or tens of thousands of dollars every month, you're going to spend a lot of time. So you're going to handle a much smaller number, because they're high maintenance and you have to stay on top of them. So you could, so in which case, this is where, for somewhat larger businesses, you can take and have senior and junior account level managers, and have the juniors work the opportunities that are lower, less risk. They're not likely to mess it up, and they get better at their job, but they'll have a higher count, and communication's a big deal. And then you give your more trusted senior account managers a much lower number, but they're all high dollar ones, so that they can be very high touch with them.
Before I go a different direction, Alex, any other questions on any of this?
No, go ahead.
So yeah, to change course, we have a discovery call, and I previously asked you like what will make this a great episode. And before I get into my last questions, I did just want to dive into this quickly because I thought you had a very interesting answer, and I won't put the pressure on you to ask if you remember. It was always be willing to explore, and you mentioned, I'll stop there and I'll see where you take that.
Well, so as a business owner in general, you need to be willing to explore new avenues. It could be new sources of revenue, new directions, new product lines. Um, and I think it's really important as a business owner you do that. As an agency owner, you have a lot of opportunity to do those things. Because there are a number of things you can do. And I've seen plenty of agencies that specialize in certain areas. I say we've put some focus on specific industries, but one of the things, because of like staffing issues, I now have half my staff in Costa Rica. And why? Because it's a very common practice for agencies to do some sort of outsourcing and have a few partners to help handle stuff when they have more work than they can deal with. You're not going to pass on the work. You need solutions to deal with it. So I've dealt with companies and people in places like India, the Ukraine, and stuff, and that can be difficult. There's challenges to it. So I went on the exploration route of finding a company that I could partner with in somewhere in our time zone. And then eventually I said, okay, the partnerships worked out well, but I want to have more control over this. And I found Costa Rica as being a good spot for my own company. And we've since recruited about half of our staff. And we've made a shift where we have more people down there actually than we have in the US now. And other companies have done this. It's not, like I've seen companies that have a lot of staff in Nicaragua. I've heard of Brazil. Colombia is becoming, bigger and stuff. The idea is, with those, I went after high English, high, experience levels, same time zones, a number of things just to make it easier to be able to work with them. And these are staffers now. You have to be able to, if I wasn't willing to look, I pay attention to what other people are doing. I see if I can do it any better for myself. And if I'm not willing to do that, you have to adapt as a business owner. If you never change, you're not going to be able to grow because you're going to run, especially in the agency world, you're going to run into barriers and you got to figure out how to go over or around them. If you can't, and that sometimes is a lot of, you have to adapt. You have to change how you're doing things. We know in the States, the talent levels there, but the cost is also extremely high depending on where you're based and stuff. And even with remote work and everything, that helps some, but it's not it doesn't solve all the problems. So I always had that problem of we don't have enough staff to do all this work. Okay, well, I can get you more staff, but I'm going to have to do it, a different way, or we can take on less work, unless you want to take a pay cut. I have to have options, so that's one of the options we went with.
Yeah, we've done a similar thing. We outsource previously mostly to Ukraine, which is where I'm from. But I completely agree with what you're saying. You get to a point where, but actually, it depends on the nature of work, right? In the US, you have the talent, but in a large part, as long as the strategy is there, you don't need the cutting edge talent that we have access to here in the US. And in order to compete, you have to go overseas. I mean, that's just the nature of where we are today.
Yeah, for our world. And we're not like reinventing the wheel here. Large advertising agencies have been doing this for a long time. I've gotten some of my employees from them. And you also have large tech companies, Google, Microsoft, come on. They started going to India decades ago. It's not, like I say, it's not new. It's not even new to our industry because that's been going on, for quite a while too. But there's a lot of talent in different places. It's just a matter of, like I say, I've dealt with Ukraine and have no problem. There's tons of talent there, and I totally support, kick the Russians' ass. Just say it. Let's see. But same thing with India. Philippines has become big. It's a matter of what you're looking for when you're trying to grow. I say I had seen a couple of companies that had modeled going after, or hiring people in Nicaragua. And I'm like, when I looked at that, I'm like, okay, there's a problem with Nicaragua. I went for Costa Rica because there's political stability there. And that was important. Nicaragua is not quite as stable as it was. They've got more of a wannabe dictator in charge. And so they've cut back on some of the freedoms. And I think that's a bad idea. So I don't want to support that. So I'll go to a country that's more stable, because that can be disruptive. Like I say, you're from Ukraine, and I'm sure you've had seeing all the disruptions that a country at war is going to have. So you have to keep those kinds of things in mind of what the future might hold when you are going to such a route.
Well said.
I'm sure the other countries are also beautiful, but Costa Rica, man, that is a beautiful country as well.
I do happen to like visiting, so it's that part doesn't hurt either.
Not talking down about the other countries, but man, Costa Rica is pretty beautiful.
Well, yeah, like I say, if you're going to plan an office anywhere or staff somewhere that you intend to visit or anything, you might as well make it worth going.
That's right. So a few questions I tend to ask at the end. If you had to teach something to other marketers, what would it be?
Well, it depends. Are we talking agency owners or marketers in general? If it's marketers, keep learning.
Any objection you want to take that?
Yeah, for marketers, it is a matter of keep learning, okay? Because there is so much that changes. There's a lot that actually stays the same, and people don't realize it because we always because we always have new platforms and stuff. It's what can you use? Whether it's a platform, a new piece of software or something. But you want to be the beauty of marketing is there are so many ways things can work. If you can think through, the issue and the way platforms can be, combined, work together, audiences, it's a really cool field. But you also got to remember, if you're a marketer, you're also going to be half data scientist, depending on what you do. So you have to be willing to really look at the data, because if you do anything online, it's all about data. So you have to be you got to be willing to look at the numbers and really take it seriously.
And, again, we keep mentioning season 3 about community, and we don't just try to talk about community and leave it in the episode. We're actually trying to build a community, and I forget how much we've kind of talked about it, but the guests that we have on, we're trying to build this community, whether it's referrals, whether it's knowledge base, things like that. So, I'd like to know, how can you work with other marketing agencies, and what other services can you partner with other agencies?
Well, we do white label for other agencies, because I've got over 30 staffers. So we have a lot of specialists, in different areas, and we'll build websites, and we partner up on marketing campaigns, and we can be in the background. We also work with guys like, chief marketing officers that are like fractional. So they're not full-time necessarily for individual companies. So we're able to help fill gaps, when you have a project that, you want to be able to take on, but you don't have the expertise. Because I think, in the marketing world, everything is about that monthly recurring revenue, and you need multiple channels, services that you offer to be able to do that. So that's really huge, being able to do that stuff.
Where specifically do you fill in those gaps?
For us, like I say, we do, SEO, and we've got, people on that front. Paid ads, we do a ton, whether it's social, pay-per-click, for Google, and we do a lot of programmatic, run ads on apps and websites that are, streaming video, audio, display ads, whatever it may be. And we build a lot of websites. Like I say, we manage about 600. They're all WordPress. So we are a WordPress shop, and we've been able to do, we've got a large enough team to do builds and maintenance and keep up on those things. Because there's all sorts of stuff that go on, in that world. So we're able to help, and we do branding too, but we're not like the type of those really large, in-depth branding campaigns where, we do logos because we get clients that ask. So, and we have graphic designers, and they like the break from doing stuff. But if you've ever dealt with a client wanting a logo, that can be that can be like pulling teeth. So we do that stuff too.
Well, I don't think you could have transitioned me into my next question any better. So now I'm going to turn it around and say, if a client asks, can you do this? And it's a service that you actually don't currently provide, how do you typically handle that request?
I like to partner up with other agencies and either hand it off or, if depending on the project, work with them. So as an example, we build e-commerce sites all the time, but I don't like e-commerce marketing. Like I'll build you the site, WooCommerce, Shopify, whatever. That's not a problem because we do, they can be highly technical. We've done a bunch of them, but actually doing it, I don't care for e-commerce marketing. We've done some and I take a pass on it. So I would rather hand it off to another agency because, like I say, I believe that that's like, as an example, and same thing goes with high level branding campaigns. That's not what we're good at, what we're experienced. So it is something that we want to pass it on to somebody else because we want to hook the client up, especially if, say, we're doing the website and we might end up maintaining it. I want to give them a good partner that can really help. And if you've ever done like e-commerce marketing, that is its own beast. We're good at location-based marketing, helping on Google Maps and getting people ranked and stuff. If we're talking SEO or paid ads, that's our sweet spot. So, and there's other types of marketing, like I say, that, we're not the fit. But I will gladly, I won't build you an app. I don't do it. Like if you want an app, sure. I will help you find a partner for it. So I think with any agency, you can be a lot of things, but don't try to be it all because they say, I just dealt with a client, like I said, this one that I was talking with yesterday, this prospective client, and they have this idea of a business. And I'm like, this thing is going to be a pain in the ass. And I don't think it's a good fit for us. It's not that he shouldn't pair up with some other marketing agency, but it shouldn't be us. I think the client was going to be difficult, but I think what they need, and he's got a software development. So if he'd have come to us originally, I would have said, well, we don't do this software, but I got a company that does. The guy that referred it, we actually work with. So, on other projects. So that's, there's a number of things that, we won't touch, but I would gladly refer out.
Yeah. One more question. What's the goal for you in this agency? Is it to continue growing it? You're at 39 employees already, manage 600 sites. Is the goal to keep going, double that in a certain amount of years, or what are you thinking?
Well, like I say, we are, definitely working to grow it constantly. We're, we want to make, some of the campaigns we do more extensive. We want to be able to get a certain, a little bit higher paying level of clientele. We like the website builds that we do, so we want to keep doing that and even take on managing more sites, but we want to expand what we're doing in the other services. And, so I don't intend on going anywhere anytime soon. I like what we do. We've got some, new ventures, and like I say, we're building out, the white label side of things, of working with other companies more, to see what they do because of the amount of expertise that we have. We will end up growing our Costa Rican and our U.S. teams, further. But, it's for us, it's a matter of, what makes sense. So there's, like I say, we're trying to bring on a little bit higher level client right now. That is, I guess, part of it's like they are more invested in their marketing. Like they understand the real value, because you end up running into some people that just don't, or they have, expectations that are not appropriate. And, the longer you do this, the more you get tired of that, kind of stuff. And so I say my advice to, other marketing agencies is, just because you see dollar signs, watch what you're, make sure you're paying attention to what's behind that, though. I say, I know this guy I was talking to yesterday, he would have spent $3,000 or $4,000 a month, but how long that would last and how difficult the result he wants. I could see, like I say, warning signs all over the place that this was not going to be a good relationship. And so I have to ignore those dollar signs. And if you do that, I say you can grow, your business. But I do think I've seen some agencies that are so niche down that they're going to struggle to grow. They're too specific. And it's like, always remember, if you're in business, did you create for yourself a job or a company? I say, I've got enough people. It is a job, but I'm not doing the day-to-day work. So make sure you know your goals.
I wish we had another hour. That just opened up like another quadrant of questions. I have so many others. Like, I know you acquired a company. I wanted to ask about that. I know you do franchising, white labeling. I wanted to dive into that. And I had a very specific question that I never got to, but it was basically, a lot of, and I don't want to answer because we're running out of time, but we'll save this for the next one. But, you grew above that kind of 25 employee count that a lot of people kind of get stuck at. And I wanted to dive into that. Save that for another episode. The last question is any book, podcast, or newsletter recommendations that can be in marketing. It doesn't have to be business, doesn't have to be whatever you want.
I'm a believer in another piece of advice for business owners is you need to constantly take in knowledge if you're a business owner. And it does not always have to be in the industry you are in. Okay. I am an avid reader. And now my biggest thing is reading business books, but I don't read a bunch of management anymore and marketing books and stuff. I read about other companies, and so I've read about UPS and Walmart and Target and Sam Adams beer and you name it, because I want different points of view and how they overcame their own challenges. And that's what you get in those stories. So a couple of ones that books that I really like from a management perspective, there's a book called Traction that's really good. That's really valuable advice for running your organization. But I also like Shoe Dog, which is the story of Nike, and it's written by Phil Knight, the founder. And he actually went back to I think it was USC or something, and took a creative writing class at like 80 years old so he could write that book.
That's great.
He didn't use a ghostwriter. It's a fascinating story, and it shows how a company pivots, and change direction and stuff. They were always running shoes, but they changed their whole brand. A lot of people don't realize it wasn't always Nike. It was Blue Ribbon Sports. Yeah. And so that is a really good book. Those are two really good books. And to get those same kind of stories and like lessons, my favorite podcast is actually, it's a company called Wondery, and they do a podcast called Business Wars. And so if you really, and they're great because they're like usually about 5 episodes. Each one will be about 20 minutes. Maybe a few more, depends on who they're talking about. And they'll tell the story of multiple, like 2 businesses, sometimes more, going against each other over their history. Think Pepsi and Coke back from, like literally the late 1800s. And beer brands. And they've got, one of the first ones I ever listened to was Netflix against Blockbuster. We all know how that kind of ended. So, so they're really good from a business standpoint, but they're told like they're fiction. So they bring in voiceover actors and stuff, and it'll be like knock, knock, knock on the CEO's door. We've got this problem. Yeah, it's like it's fascinating because they take from business books and they interview like the authors, and then they put together the whole storyline, of it, and they recreate scenes. Because like if you look at History Channel. They've been running like the Men That Built America, the Titan, and they've got the food that built America, the cars that built everything that built America and now the world. And they're still just business stories. You can see Harley Davidson, how they got started and stuff. So it's really fascinating because they'll take you back to the beginning. It's not just the most recent stuff. Like
that's great. I there's a lot of podcasts out there, so you got to be a little bit different. And I actually like that angle of kind of making it a little fictional, even though it's a nonfiction story. Yeah.
I'll give you one last book too. There's a book on Netflix written by most people don't realize it, but was it the founder, what we think of as the founder? I'm thinking of his name, Hoffman or whatever. Well, there's a guy named Randolph that back when they first got going, he was actually the CEO, and it was the late 90s. And he wrote a book about Netflix, and it does tackle a little bit of the Blockbuster stuff and everything, but it's a really fascinating book because of that point of view. So there's a ton of stuff out there, but I really recommend that kind of stuff. Like I say, those, because of those different perspectives.
That was great. I like that you gave 2 relatively popular ones because I think when you hear things more than once, especially on this podcast, that's when you start to like really pay attention to it. So Traction and Shoe Dog and the podcast, I think that was great as well. As we come up to the end of the episode, I just want to give you an opportunity to mention how people can find you and anything else you'd like to end with.
They can find us at titandigital.com. My email is cash@titandigital.com. And amazingly enough, if you go on like LinkedIn and you do like the / like you can, if you search for me, you're going to find me. not a bunch of others and stuff. It's not going to get very confused because I actually have like the /cash.miller or something, whereas there's no numbers or anything associated because it's not like I'm not one of a bunch of other people. So yeah, you can definitely reach out, that way too, and feel free to connect with me.
Those of us who have to do research on you before calls like this, thank you for having so we don't dive into anything that's in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So, but thank you so much for coming on the show. And for those of you who've learned something new from the episode, please consider giving us a like or a follow so we can continue getting the highest quality of guests. And as always, thank you for listening. Cash, this was great. I think this had a lot of new topics and everything. So thank you for coming on.
Well, great. It was pleasure being on the show.
Thanks for listening to the Masters in Marketing Agency podcast. I hope you got a ton of value out of this episode. And before we go, I just want to thank our sponsors, DevNoodle. DevNoodle provides marketing agencies with the ability to offer their clients unlimited website design, build, and management services with fixed monthly plans. If website design, development, and maintenance is holding your agency back from growing, please reach out to us at devnoodle.com, where we make websites easy for you and easy for your clients. devnoodle.com.